Hello everyone, I'm Peter, and in this short video, it should take about 15 minutes or so, and we're going to talk about moving beyond basic navigation systems in web design, and also moving beyond image sliders as well. Well, looking at creative examples of both. So we'll whiz straight on. There's going to be lots of links around for you to go and explore some of these examples yourself, and hopefully you'll take inspiration from some of these and embed them in your own coursework. So moving beyond basic navigation systems, the first thing that we need to do before we even start developing a navigation menu is to consider what we're developing, who we're developing for, what we're going to include, what we're not going to include, because without knowing that information we can't really go ahead and start developing navigation. So Barfield terms this goals, audience and scope. So these three key areas that we need to have a solid understanding about before we go ahead and develop. And this image that was showing up looks at, well, it's a heat map. So it overlays on an image on a web page the areas that the users have been looking at, and these kinds of tests are normally done in a usability lab, and you will learn a lot more about this at a different time. But essentially, as the image shows, the left hand side navigation and the navigation across the top is getting all of the heat. That's where it's most dense, and that means that most people are looking in these areas immediately or the most. So that would it therefore makes it quite straightforward that that's the obvious place to put navigation, to put important bits of information. So a lot of the time we will see these horizontal navigation menus that go across the top, and there are a couple of different examples. So Apple's, for example, is a very well known. It's regarded quite highly. It's very simple and straightforward, but it's a one-level navigation bar. So you've got items like Store, Mac, iPod, iPhone, iPad, and you just click on a button and it takes you through to a new page. It's very simple. Facebook is quite similar. On Facebook's page you've got notifications, and that kind of shows new notifications. You can click on the Find Friends link, things like that. HMV's website isn't too dissimilar really. You've got DVD, Blu-ray, film on demand, games. You click on one of them and it takes you through to a whole new page. So that's quite straightforward. Facebook also have this vertical navigation on the left hand side as well. So they kind of double up, and that shows a number of different things, news feeds, messages. Some of it's duplicated, but some of it's accessing things like groups, so you get a bit more information as well. Now, Amazon, obviously one of the biggest shop and retail sites on the internet, they incorporate a bit of quite a larger two-level navigation menu. It's expanding. So, for example, if you hover over the menu item about music, games, film, and TV, then you get a sub-menu that pops out like a drop-down menu essentially, with further information. So you've got music, MP3 downloads, film and TV, Blu-ray, things like that. And these type of navigations really started coming into play around the dot-com boom, around 2000, the year 2000, and it really enabled users to get deeper into your site by one click. So it kind of made things a bit easier to use. For any of our watchers that are good shoppers, they would probably have heard of ASOS. So ASOS are a big website that sells men and women's clothes, and they've adopted what's more of a bit of a modern feature, you could say, called a mega menu. So you can hover over the women menu item and it will drop down. You can get a lot of information straight in there. So it starts with some of the new in items, clothes, shoes, accessories, designer stuff, and then there's an alphabetical list ranging from accessories and bags and purses all the way through to tops, trousers and t-shirts. And then you've also got some more information, whether it's some of the top items that have been selling, things like that. So again, this really allows you to get to more information. The Target website, Target's a US-based shopping website as well. They've gone down a similar approach. They have kind of categories, so you've got accessories. If you hover over women, you've got accessories, clothing, shoes, and under each one you can go straight in. So if you can look down the shoes menu and you can go straight to sandals if that's what you're after. So it really allows you to drill much deeper into a site very quickly. But what you'll obviously notice is that the sites that incorporate this type of menu are generally the larger, big websites. But what's really interesting with navigation now is the emergence of things like tablet devices and smartphones, because they're really reinventing how we traditionally think about navigation. So, the iPhone came along, for example, and they've got these square apps that go along the screen. So rather than going to a menu item which brings us up a long list of applications like you might think of maybe on a Windows computer, the iPhone really turns that right on its head and gives you the apps very straightforward in your face. So you can just click on an app and it takes you straight there. So that could maybe influence how you develop navigation on a website, for example. We've seen things like smart TVs that are quite common now as well. And this is a regular TV screen that then enables you to surf the web, access things like Facebook or Twitter on there, but you can also access things like Hulu Plus or Netflix or ESPN, things like that. So it's a smart TV, and that's very much based on apps as well. Big square apps, you can't really miss them. It's very straightforward and very easy to use. So these can really influence how we think differently about website navigation. And I just wanted to touch on breaking down navigation menus a little bit more and think about, from a usability perspective, what is a navigation menu all about. And if you think about a button on a navigation menu, they've got different states. So when you look at a button, it's in a natural normal state or the up state. When you hover your mouse over it, it becomes the over state, so you can get some visual feedback to say that you're actually hovering over the button, and then when you click on the button, it's the down state. So this example is a rectangle orange button. The button itself's got a thin border on there. The button itself has got a gradient, so it goes from a paler orange down to a deeper dark orange at the bottom, so it's a nice little gradient. Perhaps the text might have a text shadow on there, and the button itself might have a box shadow. And that will be its normal state, but when you hover over that button, perhaps the CSS gradient will flip over. Maybe the box shadow, the shadow on the actual button itself, might change. So by default, you might have a bit of a shadow on it to make it look like the button is raised from the page. And then when you hover over it, that shadow might flip, so you might get an inner shadow, which would make it look like the button's pressed in. And that gives the user a lot of visual feedback. And again, when you click on it, maybe the gradient will flip again. So it's different ways, and it's quite straightforward. It's very natural to see when you hover over a button, but it's often things that you might miss or forget about when you're developing it. So it's things you need to be consciously aware of. But so far we've only looked at quite straightforward navigation menus, and we're going to look now at some more creative examples. So the first one I wanted to touch on is what's known as speaking navigation. And these speaking navigation examples contain a bit more information rather than just have home, about us, products, for example. These examples here, you've got maybe our portfolio, and then on that you might have a little bit more text underneath that says, let us show you our work. Now I really like some of these examples because you might have about, and underneath that you might have history, resume, etc, etc. And I've accessed a million websites in the past where I've tried to get to a bit of information and presumed it would be under one particular button. And I've looked at that page and it's been a bit of a waste because it's not there. So adopting this speaking navigation can really make the user experience a bit more user-friendly, a bit more easier. We also have descriptive icon-based navigation menus. So as well as a word, you would have an image with it, an icon, and that might play on a metaphor to some degree. I really like this example where from the MacRabbit website, and they've got goodies, and along with that they have a little sweet icon, so it's playing on the visual metaphor again, but that's really useful because we can connect with that. It's a bit more user friendly, and actually some of that, like the sweet icon, is probably a bit more light-hearted as well, so they can be really effective. We also see tab navigation, which builds on the metaphor of the office, the workplace. And you've got tabs very similar to a folder, where we have tab dividers, and they play on that. Some other examples that we've seen nowadays would be called hidden navigation. So, for example, I went on this one site and I couldn't really see the navigation. I could just see these little icons very, very discreetly popping it to the main view of the page. And it was only when the mouse goes close to that that the items on the menu pop out and then show where they are. There's good and bad aspects to that though, because if you don't know what's there, then you might not really go to click on it. So if that was perhaps your nan who was accessing the website and she wasn't a very experienced user, she might miss that, might not know what to do, go off the website really, really quickly. So part of this, developing any kind of website or any navigation menu, is to know who your audience are, and that way you can develop something that's they would definitely understand and be able to use. Google also adopt this kind of hidden navigation to some degree. They have this little cog icon, and it's only when you click on the icon that you get to see maybe the advanced search or some various settings. The Mozilla Firefox website is also adopting some kind of similar approach, and it's only that they have this Mozilla sign with the little arrow. You click on that and it's almost like the page slides down, revealing the navigation system above. That's actually quite nice, but again, would a novice user understand that they have to click on the Mozilla sign in order for it to scroll down? There's also some car websites that just show a nice, perhaps a nice image. The menu's really discreet, it's tucked away on the left-hand side, and it's only when you go over and either hover or click on the menu item that it slides out into view. And again, you can see some really creative examples of this, but would everyone be able to understand it and intuitively know how to use that? That is a different matter. And then we have some other websites that really build on metaphors. So for example, there's one site that builds on the music metaphor, and you get this bit of an amplifier. It's very creative. And there's these little control knobs for bands, tours, for the press. There's one for the online store, news, so on and so forth. Very creative, but is it user-friendly? Would you intuitively know that these are buttons, because it's so lifelike, if you like? It's so much playing on the metaphor there. So again, it's very creative, but you need to be careful about what you use and how you use it. So that's quite a lot on navigation menus. We're just going to really briefly touch now on image galleries and image sliders. And image galleries, I'm sure you've all used an image gallery on the internet in the past. They're really effective for perhaps showing quite a number of small images, or thumbnails as we like to call them, and then when you click on or hover on one of them, you will get to see the larger version of it. And a JavaScript version on the web is really popular, called Lightbox, or there's various names to them, and you would maybe click on an image and the background of the website itself seems to grey out, and then the image focuses probably in the middle of the screen, quite big, to basically pull all your attention to the image. And you can often cycle back and forward with these as well. They're very common on the web and very effective. Image sliders are a little bit different. You would generally include quite a lot less than in an image gallery. You might only have maybe 5 images in an image slider, but there would be quite big images, and there would be more feature type images. And that's been made popular both by Flash and also by JavaScript and jQuery. So some of these websites, they would span the full width of the page. You might have little indicators to show how many they are in the bottom corner, perhaps. Sometimes you would see the main image in the middle of the page and a brief glimpse of images to the left and the right, and you would have little arrows and you can scroll back or forward. Sometimes they might progress automatically as well. And sometimes you just get a main image in the middle of the screen with arrows either side that you can click back or forward. And they can be really interesting. And to really develop these further, you can have different transitions on how these images move from one to the next. They might maybe slide in from the right of the screen across and push one out the way. You might have one fade out, one fade in. You might have one actually pixelate out and the other one pixelate in at the same time. So you can get a lot of different transitions that you need to think about when you're looking at these different type of image sliders. You can get really creative with these.